but in just the mere act of sitting in silence. Sitting in silence, being the silence. Because that's what is there to be revealed, is that sitting in silence is not a goal. The goal of sitting is not to attain silence, that is to mistake it. There isn't a goal. There is just the sitting in silence and recognizing yourself to be the silence. And everything else to be but a mental projection. Everything. Sitting in silence is one of the best meters, the best truth meters we have, because if it doesn't exist when you're sitting in silence, then it doesn't actually exist. And if you hold up so much of what's in your mind to that standard, if it doesn't exist when I'm not thinking about it, that means it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Not much holds up to such a high standard, does it? Most everything crumbles. If it doesn't exist when I'm not thinking about it, then it can't be real. Not ultimately real. Very, very little actually survives this test. At least very little that we hold to be real survives this test. And that's something that sitting in silence can actually show us, if we want to see it. If we don't see it as a goal-centered activity in which I'm just trying to do it well or right or get really good at it, that we see sitting in silence is actually an opportunity to see into the true nature of things. And so it doesn't need to be overvalued or undervalued. If it's thought only as a means to an end, then it's overvalued. Because we think you must do this in order to achieve a certain end, meditating as a means to get to a spiritual goal. Then we tend to adhere to ideas that say we must meditate a certain amount and a lot, and it's sort of the highway to enlightenment. But that's to turn it into a goal. As soon as we turn it into a goal, then it is trapped within what I call the dream state. A state of consciousness which is dominated by the mind, which is created by the mind. The dream state is just another word for mental consciousness, actually believing the mental noise in one's head, which is the common state of consciousness. Right? The common state of consciousness of humanity is one in which human beings believe the mental noise in their head. And so because of that, most human beings have this absolutely compulsive relationship with thought. They think compulsively. It's like an addiction, as if you would sort of cease to be if you didn't think. Well, that may actually end up being true on one level. Especially when we see that our whole idea of ourselves is just that. It's just an idea of ourselves. Then that, of course, ceases to be. But in a very simple manner of speaking, that's all awakening is. It's our consciousness going from this dream state in which we are caught in a compulsive nature of thought and its worldview and its self-view. And going from this, which is itself a dream state, created by thinking, and going through that state of consciousness which is not perceiving from thought, where thought is no longer compulsively always moving. And so therefore we're not deriving our sense of self from it, our sense of reality from it. So that state of consciousness that is not caught in a compulsive state of mind, compulsive thinking, that state of consciousness which is outside of compulsive thinking, that's the state of awakening. That's the state of enlightenment. But it's actually just a state. That's why they call it pure consciousness. It's just pure. It's just pure perception, pure awareness. No compulsive labeling. So most human beings, we have to label everything, right? Everything's good or bad or beautiful or ugly, or everyone is right or wrong, or beautiful or ugly or safe or not safe. Everything in the dream state of consciousness is compulsively labeled. We know what should and shouldn't be happening. We know what should and shouldn't have happened. It's all this sort of compulsive nature of thinking. And the simplest way to talk about awakening is one wakes up from that. That's what awakening is. And as soon as we wake up from that, what we realize, not intellectually realize, our whole being realizes that, my God, there's no truth in it. There's no truth in that compulsive nature of thought. There's no truth in one's thoughts about themselves or others or the world or anything else. It doesn't mean you can't think. You can still think. It doesn't mean the thought never comes through your brain. The thought can still come through your brain. But it means that your sense of reality, of what is true, is no longer derived from the compulsive movement of thought. And then there's pure perception, pure consciousness. There's no interpretation. This is what unconditioned is. Unconditioned in a practical way, in a way that relates on a human level, just means not translating, not judging, not getting caught in the mind's matrix. Because the mind is always translating experience. And so a pure state of consciousness is when we're proceeding from outside of that whole movement. Whether that movement is happening or not doesn't much matter.